Hello, everybody. I see some people coming in now. Looks like we have 11 people so far. We'll just give everybody a moment or so to join, and then we'll get started. All right. While we're still waiting on some people to join, I just want to take a moment to introduce myself. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Nick. I work as a training specialist here at Gravity. Um, I've been here for almost 2 years now. I have John accompanying me as well. He's also a training specialist, and he'll be overseeing the Q&A as well as the audience chat. Please feel free to post any questions related to variables inside the audience chat, or you can use the Q&A section as well. But other than that, I hope you enjoy the webinar, and let's get started. So what we're going to be covering for today is I'm going to go over the introduction to variables. So we'll go over what exactly the variables are. We'll go over the variables panel, how we can navigate the variables panel and the different areas related to it. There's two ways that we're able to find the source of a variable, delete a variable, as well as create a variable. So I'll go over all of those different ways, as well as how we can place variables in our report. So with that being said, I have here my variables webinar environment. And the first thing to note about variables is we're going to have a periods report. You'll all have one throughout your in your document, in your environment, whether it's called a periods report or whether it's called a periods template, you will have one. And the thing that's important to note about them is this is how your different years are brought in through your report. So it'll look similar to mine, however, it might look a little bit different. And essentially, what variables are is they're there to help us automate the report. Okay. Every year you're going to have to switch the current year to a different year. And nobody wants to have that job that has to go into the report and switch every single year. That could be a whole job in itself. So what we can do is we can use variables to automate those years for us. So we can do that by changing the period value here, and then they will change throughout these areas. As you can see, they're tied to this period. So the way that we can kind of see that in our variables is if we go into, say, the MD&A in here, and I open it up, you can see we have different years in here. And we are able to change these. Right now, they're just regular basic text in here, but we can change them into variables. So if I had wanted to open up the variables panel, let's say, I could go ahead and we can open it outside of Gravity. So I can click on the three dots, go to open, and that's going to open the document outside of Gravity. Now, you may be able to open the variables panel inside of Gravity as well if you're using the different extensions or the different extensions from Google. However, we can always open it outside, and then we can go to extensions, Gravity Sheets add-ons, and we can click on show variables panel. Now, you may need to give it permissions and accept a few different permissions when opening the variables panel for the first time. But after you've given those different permissions, you will be able to go ahead and open up that variables panel. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see my panel's open, and we'll have the report name. So that'll always be the report that you're specifically working in. And then we will also have our import and review. So what's important to note about import and review is we have in import, we have all of the different variables available to us inside of our report. So these are all the different variables I'm able to place. Whereas review will show us only the variables that are on the specific document or object that we're inside of. Okay. Next, we have in this field, we have link, note, and page. And these are the different types of variables, okay? So a link type variable is any date, phrase, table, or number, whereas note and page type variables are there to automate note and page numbering. So as an example, let's say that in our introduction section, we were referencing in our letter of transmittal, please refer to page so-and-so in the statistical section for more info on our statement of net position, okay? So in the event that we wanted to do that, of course, we don't know what page that specific document will be on until we generate. And us having to go through and generate our report to find out what page that's on to then change our letter of transmittal can be quite time consuming. And it also isn't really practical when if we add in additional documents or if we add in additional sentences throughout our report, that page number could change. So instead, what we would do is we would insert a new page, page type variable in that statistical section and reference it inside of our letter of transmittal. So the same is true for note variables. They're there to automate note numbering. The next area we have the search area. So we are able to search for specific variables. So we can see I have a number of different variables here. Let's say I wanted to search for my, under my review, I have that variables webinar current year. Let's say I wanted to search for it. I could search in this area and you can see it populates. The next area we have after that is we have the 3 lines. And the 3 lines, this is where one of the ways we can create a variable, one of the ways we can hide variables, and we can refresh all. So with the variables panel, it doesn't refresh automatically. So if we were to have the variables panel open inside of our MD&A, I went to the 3 dots, opened it outside Gravity, went to the extensions, Gravity Editor add-ons, and showed my variables panel. If I was to make a new variable on this panel, right, and I already had this open, I would have to force it to refresh in order to see that new variable I created. Because it is an extension, it does need to refresh, and it doesn't refresh automatically. If you were to just open up the variables panel, it refreshes as it opens, so there would be no need to refresh it again. So the next thing I wanted to go over is the hide variables. So you can see that these variables are highlighted in blue currently. And if I click on hide variables, you'll notice that they will change and we will no longer be highlighted in blue. So it's important when you're working within your report that you want to keep this show variables turned on so you do know what different lines are variables inside of your report. Let's go ahead and insert a variable into our MD&A. So we can see in our period report, we have the current year, 2025. And if I wanted to insert that variable in here, the first thing I'm going to want to do is create a space so that when I bring in that variable, it's not touching anything. From there, I can then look for that variable webinar, current year. And if I click on this variable and I click the blue insert button, it's going to insert that variable. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that this variable is yellow, whereas in the periods report, it's blue. And that's because variables, depending on whether they're a source where they're created or whether they are yellow as a destination variable, they'll be a different color. So because this variable is being placed here, it's going to be destination, which will make it yellow, whereas this one will be blue because it's a source type variable. So the next thing that I wanted to go over is how we can create variables, okay? So if I go into my periods report and I go to my MD&A narratives and I open up this page, this is one of the ways that we can insert variables or create variables from here. So depending on your environment, you may have a different way. It could be using spreadsheet to narrative tabs in your spreadsheets, or it could be destination variable spreadsheet tabs. So there's a number of different ways that they're created. However, you're going to find where those variables are created, and then you can make them from there. So Again, I'm going to want to open this outside of Gravity. And we can see on my MD&A, I do have a 291.8 million for the total expenditures. And on my MD&A narratives, I have that 291.8 million. So if I wanted to create this as a variable, again, I'm going to go ahead and open up my variables panel. While it's opening here, we can see that we'll want to just click on the cell that our variable is in, and we can go to the 3 lines and click on that create variable. And this is going to show us a new area where we're able to create that variable. So the first thing we're going to want to do is create a name for that variable. So I'll put in variables webinar, and I'm going to add in total X, and then I'm just going to write in tests. And if you're following along in your different training areas and you're also adding in variables, just make sure you add in tests so you know not to use that in your main report. From there, I have the option to switch between link, note, and page. And we know this is a link type variable because we're not automating a note or a page, we're adding in a value. In the description, I could add a different description, or alternatively, I can copy and paste the name into the description. Once I press OK, I'm going to get a notification down here letting me know that the variable was created. You can see that it's forcing to refresh the variable now that I've created it. And if I go to my review page where I can see all the variables on this specific document, I see that variable there. Now, if I go back to my MD&A and I go into the import, if I search for that variable, variables webinar, you can see it's not there yet. And again, that's because I do have to force it to refresh. While this is refreshing, I spoke a little bit earlier about what color source variables and what color destination variables are. And I have a poll here that I'm going to launch that'll you'll have the opportunity to take a look and see what you think is for the correct colors for both source variables and destination variables. So you can see that live now. Once there's a few votes in, I'll add it to the stage and you'll be able to see the different variables there and which one was correct. So I'm going to close it here in a couple moments. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. And you've got 9 seconds left if you're still trying to vote there. And then once you see that, once it closes, I'll just add it to the stage so you can see. So you can see it's closed now. If I add it to the stage, everybody was correct. They are blue and yellow for both source variables and destination variables. So now, as I was saying earlier, we're going to go back into doing our variables here. So now that I've created that variable and my refresh has gone through, I can go ahead and insert that variable. So again, I'm going to want to create a space so that variable is not touching anything. I can click on the variable and I want to click the blue insert button. And that's going to insert that variable in, from which I can then delete that static number there. Now we have that variable inserted as well. You'll notice that here inside the import area, we have the object and it says MD&A narratives. This is one of the ways that we can go to the source of a variable. So if I were to click on this area, you're going to see it's going to open up that MD&A narratives from which I'd be able to see where this variable is coming from. Going back to our MD&A, we can see that we also have additional areas that we can insert variables into. So there is another way that we're able to insert a variable into our report. And for this area, we don't need to have our variables panel open. So if I go back to my MD&A narratives, I'll close my variables panel here as well. We can see we have that 25.8 million here. And I can create this as a variable. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on the cell. And if I go to extensions, Gravity Sheets add-ons, this time I'm not going to show variables panel. I'm going to go down to variables and click on copy create. Once I click on copy create, you're going to see that it populates almost the exact same as before. However, this one only has name and description. And the reason being is that inside of this way to create a variable, we're only able to create link type variables this way. So by default, it'll be made as a link type variable. I'll add in that variables webinar test, copy the name into the description. And when I click OK, I'm still going to get a message down here letting me know that it had copied variable VW test. I can now go to my MDNA and I will place a space just like I did before. And again, going to extensions, Gravity Editor add-ons. Under variables, I'm now going to click paste. And we'll see that it brings in that variable there. So it is still copied to our clipboard here. So I could continue to paste it in additional areas if I'd wanted to. Go down, click paste. So this is useful if we're going ahead and we're trying to place variables into multiple different places. We're able to quickly do that by copying it and pasting it, as opposed to going through and using our variables panel the whole time. If I go to that previous variable that I had created and I go to variables and click on copy create, you're going to notice I'm not going to have to create that variable again. It's going to let me know that I've copied it. And from there, I can go ahead and paste it where I need to. Go to extensions, Gravity Editor add-ons, variables, and paste. So now I've inserted that variable in two places that we don't need it. So there's two ways that we can delete variables. And how I'm going to do the first way is I am going to open up my variables panel, show variables panel. And while this is loading, it's going to load in and I'll be able to show you how we can delete this variable in here. So again, we're going to want to go to the review area and you can see that we have this variable placed twice. And if I wanted to know which one it is, if I click on it, you can see that it highlights this area. From there, when I'm in the review tab, I can click on the red trash can icon and it will delete this variable for me. You can see inside of here that there is a broken variable. We can see by this logo here that it's a broken variable. And in the event we have a broken variable, this means that the variable was not deleted the correct way. So most likely somebody had just highlighted it and backspaced it. And in this event, it does appear that it's gone. However, Gravity still recognizes that there was a variable there because it wasn't deleted properly. I'm going to show you shortly what we can do to resolve this. But in the meantime, I'm going to show you the other way we can delete this variable that we don't want. So with this one, we don't need that variables panel open and you don't need to highlight the variable, just click anywhere inside of it. And under extensions, where we went to copy, create, and paste, we have the option to delete. And we have the second way we can go to the source. So I'm going to go ahead and click delete. And it's going to give me the delete variable VW test where I can click OK. And we'll see it gets deleted. So it's important to note that if I was to go back to the MDNA narratives, and we know this is a variable, if I try and go ahead and delete this variable, it is going to prompt me and say that this variable is in use. So this is actually a great little failsafe where if you go ahead and you were to accidentally try and delete a variable that's in use, it won't let you. So this is only for source type variables. Keep that in mind. So the next thing I wanted to get into is I wanted to go over the variables dashboard. I'm going to go ahead and close these and I'll go ahead and open up my variables dashboard here. Double click on it to open it. And while I have this open, this will be the last area for me to go over today in our variables webinar. So please feel free to ask any more questions in the chat there. But apart from that, you can see that in column A, we have our variable name, and yours will look much similar to mine, if not the exact same. Mind you, you'll have more variables inside of here. So if I go through, we can see we have variable name in column A. In column B, we will have the source or the destination of the variable. So you can see that we have the source and then we have the destination of where it's placed. Next, we'll have the variable type, whether that's link, note, or page. After that, we will have the source objects. So you can see they're all currently coming from the periods report, and the destination is where it's being placed. Okay. And you can always click on these to open it up in those different areas. Next, you'll have your report, and then you'll have whether it's valid or not. So you'll get a green check mark if it's valid, and you'll get a red X if it's not valid. In the valid details, it'll tell you if it's passed or if there's a reason why it's not working. So we can see that this one here is invalid and the name range wasn't found. And this was that logo error that we had received when we were inside of our review area for the variables. Because this variable was deleted incorrectly, we get this red X. And admin users should be able to go ahead and delete broken variables. How we can do that is we can click on the three dots. We can go down to data, and under delete broken variables, we can click on that and we can see we have one broken variable inside of here. I can go ahead and click to delete it and delete that broken variable and then confirm. So we want to make sure that we're always deleting variables the correct way, because having one or two broken variables isn't typically an issue. However, if you have a large number of variables that are broken in your report, it can cause issues during generation. Now I can go ahead and see that if I were to refresh this page, it will see that broken variable is gone. So I'll click on the three dots in my variables dashboard, refresh all imports, and not only are we going to see that this broken variable is gone, but the new variables that we've inserted and created throughout our report are going to populate in this area as well. So you can see our variable that we inserted from our periods report is there. We have our new variables that we created in VW test, our VW total expenditures test, as well as where we inserted the current year. You'll also notice that there are no broken variables in our report anymore. Next, after the valid details, we'll have description. Under the description, it more often than not will be the same as the variable name. However, if it's different, you'll notice that in this area. Lastly, you'll have the sheet name of the spreadsheet that you're in, that it was placed in or coming from. And anytime that you see that it's blank in this area, you know that it's not a part of a spreadsheet and it's coming from an editor document. So before we end the presentation here for our variables webinar, I'm going to go ahead and launch one more poll question here. Please take your time answering that. And in the meantime, while people are answering that, please take a look at the different areas that you can ask questions in both the chat and inside of the Q&A area. So just as a recap of what we went over today, we did go over the introduction to variables and what they are. We went through the variables panel, finding the source of a variable, deleting variables, creating variables, as well as how we can place them. So please go ahead and ask those questions and we can take a look at those different questions. A couple questions here I see inside. So for the users, do not add variables to the variables dashboard. That's correct. So you won't ever come into your variables dashboard and add the variables in manually. You'll go ahead and when you've placed variables throughout your report, you can then go ahead and refresh all imports to see those variables populate in this area. Another person asking me if I can re-show the step of deleting broken variables. Absolutely. So if you have broken variables throughout your report, you can go ahead and click on the three dots of your variables webinar, or of your report rather, go down to data and under delete broken variables, this area, you can click on it and it'll show you any variables that are broken in your report, and you can go through and delete them in this area. Um, okay, so it looks like that's all the questions as of right now. So I do have a webinar survey here that if you have the time to fill out that webinar survey, that would be much appreciated. We are hosting another webinar next week for Act for Roll Forward. Please, if you still have the newsletter that was sent out, you should have the link there. If you no longer have access to that or can't find it, please reach out to your CSM and they will be able to send over the different link to join that webinar. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.